Blog Talk Radio. Welcome to the Women Who Rock with Success show, a digital media for professional and entrepreneurial women. Women are profiled on our digital platforms for branding and networking opportunities. To advertise on one of our shows, just go to our website at www.womenwhorockwithsuccess.com and submit a request on our advertising page. Did you know that we also report stories with top-notch media communications? Editors and reporters can submit credible and validated stories to our media source. Just go to www.topnotchmedia.org. Women Who Rock with Success continues to brand women and their profiles. Women Who Rock with Success is coming soon to Apple TV. You can also find us on Google Play, Roku TV, iHeartRadio, and other digital media sources. The show will begin in a moment with your host, Mrs. Diane Winbush.
And good morning and welcome to Women Who Rock with Success. And we are delighted that you tuned in with us on today on the show. And so Women Who Rock with Success, what we try to do, we try to branch out into other avenues that are important to women as well as to men. So today we'll be talking about immigration policies and laws. And today we have in the studio with us is none other than attorney Elizabeth Ricci. So welcome to the show. Good morning. Elizabeth? Okay, we're going to take a quick commercial break, and we'll be back in just a moment.
Diane.
Good morning. Good morning. Hi.
Hey there. I'm sorry. I don't know what happened. I was on the line.
Okay,
so
yeah, and I did. That's fine. That's fine. That's fine. Thank you so much for taking your time out to join us on today. And so we want to get right into the broadcast because individuals are looking for information. And so I actually put this online as a registration tool. And so there were a lot of people that responded. So that is great. And so
I'm so glad. It's an exciting topic.
It is, and there is sometimes the topic is sometimes it's muted where individuals either don't want to discuss it or they perhaps maybe try to push it to the side for another date, and so that's the reason why we felt that it was interesting, an attorney to be able to come onto the show and be able to discuss some important topics that are important to not just immigrants, it's important to individuals that are of the United States that advocate for immigrants as well. So just tell us a little bit about you and how you got started.
Sure. So thank you for having me on the show. I'm so excited to be with you. I practice immigration law. I've been doing so for about 20 years, and it was kind of kismet. I had just finished school, wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. I did have immigration experience. I had studied immigration under the guy who literally wrote the book, Ira Kurzban. And I had worked in an immigration firm, and then the law was about to change. Immigration law was going to change significantly. It was in 1999 that we knew the rule would sunset or expire on April 30th of 2001. So as April 30th got closer, I said to my then boyfriend, now husband, this is really something that we need to jump on So we got in before that law change, 245I of the Life Act, and a lot of people think that was an amnesty. We haven't had an amnesty since Ronald Reagan. It was not an amnesty. And so I got baptized by fire and just started, hit the ground running right out of school, and I've been doing it ever since. I love it. It's trying, but I like keeping families together and keeping American businesses in business. I do mostly employment-based and family-based immigration. Asylum is so difficult right now. It's virtually impossible to get a case approved under the current administration, so I almost always refer those out. I don't want to take a case if I don't think they have a good chance of success. So I do mostly family and employment, and my husband does the deportation defense. So we do almost all areas of immigration under one roof.
Oh, wow. That is so very exciting. So, what are some hot topic buttons that you target for your client? I know we talked. You just talked about as far as the the employment. So, just take us just a little briefly into that.
So within employment is the I-9 verification. So everyone has to have a Form I-9 on file if they are an employee. So that's irrespective of their immigrant status. So you may have, 10 U.S. citizen employees. All of them need that form. So that form verifies someone's eligibility to work and their identity. And filling out the form incorrectly can end up in fines or penalties, and then if there's a repeat offender, even prison time. So I give talks. I was at a convention for the Florida Lodging and Restaurant Association recently explaining that form because it can be very expensive if you get an audit and immigration comes in and says, let me see all your I-9. So that's something that I concentrate on, and it's hot right now because we're seeing so many ICE raids, if you will. It's not just the employees who are being inspected, but it's the employer's practices. So I-9 compliance is something I enjoy doing. I do a lot of lately. But I do something really neat called the National Interest Waiver. And the National Interest Waiver is a way someone can sponsor themselves for a green card if they are talented. So I had somebody once who was a drummer whose drum was water, for example. And she played in operas, this water drum. I do a lot of scientists that way, a lot of entrepreneurs. And it is great for me because I'm able to work directly with the client. They can skip the traditional line, which is many years long. When you hear people say, why don't they get in line? That line is impractical. It's years, a couple of years to even 20 or more years. So this is a way for most aliens to skip that line and share their talents with us almost immediately. And immigrants make America great, so we want to do that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, when we hear the word immigrant, all of us have heard it. And so when I was perhaps maybe younger, when I heard the word immigrant, the first thing I thought of was Latino and Hispanic. So it does not compile just of Latinos and Hispanics. So share with the listeners and define what an immigrant actually is.
Well, that's a great question because there's actually a legal definition to the word immigrant, and that is someone who plans on living in the United States permanently. So, for example, someone here on a student visa from another country is not an immigrant. An immigrant in the lay sense is just someone from another country. But in the legal sense, an immigrant is someone who has evidenced an intention to remain in the U.S. permanently by a certain filing, by having requested, for example, a green card. So it's easy for us to think that immigrants are Hispanic because we are closer to Spanish-speaking countries than, for example, Europe. And if you're having a party in your yard, you're going to expect your neighbors to come by, not somebody who lives in the next state, because that's not practical. They're not nearby you, but we're near Canada. We're near Mexico and Central America. So people from those places are more likely to come here than people from further away. But in the legal sense, it just means someone who's evidenced an intention to be here permanently as versus a non-immigrant, like a student, someone who's just studying here temporarily.
Okay. So previously, some years ago, I was able to work in a federal capacity, and I was able to witness some things as to how the immigrants ICE go out and detain
Mhm.
immigrants and what have you, those that are searching for jobs, but they would kind of maybe stake out at restaurants, looking for work. And
Mhm.
so, in your terms, why is it such like a raid? Because my issue with that is, if they're getting into the country, why try to find ways to try to push them back out of the country? Why can't we find some type of a lucrative tool
Mm.
for them to be able to work on while they're
Right.
here? Okay, you've gotten over here in the country, so why am I initiating ICE, which I know that's their job to go out and find them, but why am I initiating ICE to go out and do these large raids and what have you, but they're in the country? So while they're here, why can't we find something lucrative for them to be
Sure.
able to do on a
Mhm.
positive perspective?
Well, it's a hot button issue. It's a political issue. It's very emotionally charged. And the last time we had a fix that would enable someone who was in the country undocumented to get a work authorization was under that 245I of the Life Act. That was in 2001. And we
Mhm.
haven't done anything to make a permanent fix since then. So
Mm.
we've got almost
Mhm.
11 million people in the country living
Mhm.
in the shadows who are not going to be able to pay into our system, at least tax-wise, the way we would like if they can't work legally. But there's no mechanism in place for them to work legally, because if they leave the country after having been here for a year undocumented, guess what? They can't come back for 10 years. So there's no
Oh.
incentive for them to leave to try to fix it. And it's this vicious cycle that we're going through. An ICE agent once told me that the most referrals they receive are from disgruntled ex-employees and
Mhm.
ex-lovers. That's who's calling immigration on people and saying, go to this site and do a raid, or go to that house,
Oh.
somebody in there is undocumented. Yep. So if we don't have
Mm.
a system in place like we did under 245I, which was not an amnesty, we charged a $1,000 penalty fee. You had to go through a
Mhm.
security clearance. You either had to have a job offer or a family member sponsor you. If we did something like that again, we can find out who is the criminal and remove that person, and we can find out who wants to work, who speaks English well, who has a family member who would like to
Mhm.
sponsor them. But with nothing in place, people are just hiding until they get caught, and it's expensive to deal with, and it tears families apart. It's just not practical. So
Mm.
people need
That.
to vote and tell their legislators that they want a fix. It doesn't have to be a automatic citizenship for 11 million people, but something.
Exactly, exactly. I had we actually are here in the state of Tennessee, which is the South,
Mhm.
and so just listen to this incredible story. So in this particular area, it's in Memphis actually, and once you go down the whole street, I think the street maybe lasts probably about 10 minutes or something like that. The apartments, it's
Mhm.
Hispanic and Latinos, all of the grocery stores, all of the gas stations, all the tax, and it's so unique how they have that street actually custom just for Hispanics. And so I have seen some work that they have done. I'm talking about illegal immigrants, and I'm talking about they got some talents where they can build
Mhm.
houses from the ground. And that's the reason why I posed that question before as
Mhm.
to why can't we just find them something to do? They'll work, and they went in there and actually put this U.S. Marshal agents. They paved his whole entire. Of course, he didn't mention it. He got the resources, but he didn't mention that they were illegal. But they went in there and paved a whole lot of stuff on his lawn and around his home and what have you for just a few fraction of dollars. They worked hard,
Right.
and so that was just that was just kind of like a heartfelt situation to me. We don't need to use them. We need to utilize them. It's a difference between the two. And so that's the reason why,
Right.
as you stated, we need to go to the legislation and see what we can be able to do to see what we can be able to do to make a change about that. I have seen a lot of stuff, have seen a lot of things, and have witnessed it with individuals losing their children, while they're trying to cross the border. So it's tough, and so I'm just trying to give the listeners as well as myself. That's the reason why we have you here. You're the expert to be able to bring the tools and resources to us so we can be able to get a handle and see what we can be able to do in our own communities. So immigrants have been in the U.S. for centuries. We all know that. So why is there so much controversy, about them being stationed, which we have hit on some of this, but the controversy of them being here in the beginning? I mean, they have been here before I was born and before some of these other individuals that are in politics have been born. So why is the big issue? Is it because of they don't have the funds to be able to feed them or take care of their expenses or what?
Well, again, it's a political issue. It's a hot-button issue, and I'm glad that you brought up the expenses. So one of the issues right now that just was overturned was the proposal that immigrants be able to show that they will not become a public charge, and that's been in place for years. So if I do a marriage-based case, for example, a husband sponsoring his foreign wife, he needs to show that she's not going to become a charge on society, and he has to give 3 years of taxes or assets to show that. And if he doesn't have that, he needs a co-sponsor. And what was going to go into effect on October 15th was even more strict, and a judge then said that was un-American to do that. And the truth is, most of the United States can trace their roots through even Ellis Island, where people came, they had pennies in their pockets, and they worked hard, and they pursued what we know as the American dream, and they made lives for themselves, and that is possible. But if people are being turned around just from the beginning of an application under the suspicion that in the future they might take benefits, which, by the way, Diane, they're not even eligible for public benefits except in, the emergency room and in rare instances, or unless they're a refugee, we are coming up with a problem that doesn't exist. Immigrants don't get public benefits. So it's a scapegoat mentality. We're going to blame the immigrants for our problems. If each immigrant who is here undocumented paid $1,000 or more, that's what it was in 2000. Maybe it's worth $2,000 now, or $1,500. Come up with a number that people can afford to pay that would help pay for the processing for people, including background checks, and you can weed out people who should not be here. I don't think anybody says everyone who's here undocumented should be here. There are certainly some bad apples, but the vast majority of people who are here undocumented are hardworking people, but they need that opportunity. And when people say, well, they're taking jobs, those are the same people who are saying that immigrants are lazy. You can't be lazy and taking an American's job at the same time. It's one or the other, right? So,
or it may be the reverse.
We don't want to be around people who are, right, exactly. We don't want to be around people who are not educated. So people need to go to school. They need to learn English. They need to learn math. They need to learn life skills. I don't want to deny that benefit to people. I don't want to be surrounded by people who don't know basic information. And then we can live in a society where people can work together and benefit from each other without all of this hatred and this anti-immigrant sentiment that's really not well-founded. People say, oh, so-and-so committed a crime. That's one person. When a white person commits a crime, we don't say, oh, white people, or a Christian guy, all Christian people. You can't do that with immigrants either. So people are real emotional, and they need to take the emotion out.
Absolutely, I must agree with that. My hat is off to Latinos and Hispanics. While I was a part of the federal workforce at that time, working with the U.S. Marshals and the ICE department. That's how I learned at least about 75% of Spanish was through them, and they were able and did not mind helping me to be able to learn it. So, and that's my thing, and that's my thing. Get them, if they are over here, let them come over here, put them in a training class, do what they need to do what you need to do to be able to, because they're not going to stop trying to come because they are trying to get a better living. Most of them are. So just like you stated, you can't put all of them in the same basket. Everybody is not a
Right.
bad apple. So how can
And so
immigrants?
you mentioned, Diane, about
Go
that
ahead.
better living. I'm sorry, real quick. So this
Mm-hmm.
better living, they wouldn't need to come here for, quote, a better life if things were well in their countries. And I was a Peace Corps volunteer in Guatemala. I worked in Mexico. I'm familiar with
Okay.
the region and the culture. But, the problem is the drug trade, Diane, because
Okay.
drugs are going through those countries from South America. They're being shipped up, and the trade ruins the areas through which it travels to get to the United States. So really, if the U.S. curbed its drug appetite, there wouldn't be a market for it. Drugs wouldn't be ruining those countries on the way, and we wouldn't have the crime, poverty, and violence in Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras, for example, that we have, precisely because of the drug trade. But because the trade is so lucrative and there's such an appetite for drugs in the U.S., that will continue. So people have been coming over in the last few years filing for asylum. That you've been hearing a lot about that in the news. So asylum is for people who have experienced persecution in the past or have a credible fear of persecution in the future only because of their race, religion, nationality, membership in a particular social group, or political opinion. That's it. You'll notice I didn't say they're fleeing crime or they're fleeing poverty. So they're not eligible for asylum, but they have a right to make the request for asylum under international law. So if a woman and children is fleeing crime and violence in Guatemala and they want to ask for asylum, they have the right to do that, and there's a process through which they have to go before a judge says, okay, this person is eligible, or no, they're not. They need to go home. But we can't start putting these new rules in place that fly in the face of international law where there are the cases of people who could be eligible for asylum. We have to allow for them to request it. But until conditions in those other countries improve, which they're not going to do, while we have the appetite for drugs in this country that we do, this problem will continue to perpetuate.
Oh wow, that is so sad. I just saw a documentary. Well, it was like a case on Dateline, just this past weekend or something like that. And so, in regards to the drug traffic, it was a community, and I'm not for sure but it was somewhere in Mexico. But it was beautiful. The island was beautiful, but there was no one stirring around. There were no children playing while they were filming the case, because the drug lords on the island have beautified it so that the residents or what have you, they don't have a need to go anywhere because the drug lords take care of them, and so that keeps the law enforcement out of the community. I'm like, wow, that is interesting, but it was so beautiful. It was kept neat and clean, and I said, well, I didn't know how to look at that. I guess I can look at it a good way, and I can look at it in a negative way. But I guess that's the reason why there is so much drug infestation and drug cartels that are in these countries, such as Honduras and Mexico and what have you. That's just their trade, and they're trying to, I guess, live the best way according to their means. Wow. So,
but I don't want your listeners, Diane, to think that all immigrants are Hispanic or Latino, and I see clients all day, every day from all over the world. I have clients from Ukraine, Russia, Canada, Bahamas, and, people want to come to this U.S. for different reasons. It's true. Some of them are fleeing terrible conditions in their home countries. Some of them are coming because they have this talent that they can get a great job in the U.S., maybe send money home temporarily. They can make their families' lives better back home. And a lot of people don't plan on staying here permanently, but because the system is so hard to navigate, they feel like if they don't stay, they're going to lose out on whatever visa or benefit that they've requested if they go home even temporarily. So then it kind of feeds into this system of people not legalizing long term because they didn't want to leave. They were scared about what was going to happen. And it's just a broken system, and it needs to be fixed.
Okay. Which kind of brings me to the next question. I had for it kind of slipped me, but then after you made that response, it came back to me. So I would like to, I guess, input this. Of course, I think all of us have worked with others where, they come to the United States, they're granted access, and then once they come, they be able to take some of what they have and they send it back home from where they came from. So do you see a lot of that with your clients where the immigrants will come here to the United States and then they'll go back and they'll put back, pay it forward for those that have been left behind?
Sure. That's called remittances. And, the biggest beneficiary of remittances in the world is Western Union, right? Because people are making those remittances via Western Union, and that's a company that has a vested interest in keeping the system the way that it is so that people continue to send their remittances home. I have an incredible story about remittances. Years ago, I was asked to be an expert witness on a case in Mexico. And I went with a personal injury attorney to Mexico because the clients had gone to a Western Union in a Walmart to send money home. And when they were leaving the Walmart, it was raining, and a semi-truck came and hit their pickup truck and killed all of the men who had sent the remittances. So we needed to go down and get some affidavits from the widows and get copies of their passports and things like that so we could make an insurance claim. And it really drove home how people rely on remittances abroad because the conditions are so poor and they need, $50 here is, maybe a couple of weeks of income for them. So these families had lost their husbands and their fathers in this terrible accident. So I went down to assist. And we were able to secure the passports, and we got the affidavits. And once we showed the insurance company that we had done that in preparation for trial, the insurance company settled immediately, and the families received some handsome fees from the insurance company. And then I hate to tell you, some unscrupulous banker down there took all of the money from all of the widows and the children. And it just got more and more tragic. So, but that story was because of remittances. The men had to physically go to the Western Union, which is how most people send money back home, and then the several tragedies were born out of it.
Oh, wow. Yeah. That is so incredible.
But, my great-grandparents did that. They came over from Italy. They worked in New York, and they sent money home for years and years and years. I mean, that's what families do, is support each other.
Yeah, and that's a great asset. It's just kind of sad how they went in there and took the money from them. Wow, that is something.
It stood with me for a long time. Yeah.
Yeah, I bet it did. So how can immigrants educate themselves more better as to how to become legalized in the United States? And I know that may be the last thing that's on their minds because they're so busy trying to hide and trying to shield their identity while they're here. But still, we're going to share this over several digital sources along with the listeners that are on here today. But they still can be able to work on it to see how they can be able to educate themselves more better as to how to become legalized, if they can, in the United States.
Well, ask questions of the right people, and I always make the analogy to a doctor. If you had a broken leg or a virus or something, you're not going to ask your next door neighbor or your cousin unless they're a doctor. So same goes for immigration. You don't ask people about their immigration cases for their advice. And I was just reading in the immigration listserv this morning, a woman in Fort Lauderdale, non-attorney, was giving people advice. She was charging $30,000 to $50,000 per case. And she was just convicted and sentenced to 18 months. And guess what? None of those people got any immigration benefit. So I strongly suggest either a nonprofit that is a legitimate nonprofit that works with immigrants or an immigration attorney. Many attorneys provide free or low-cost consultations For example, in Florida, if you need an attorney, you can ask the Florida Bar, and they can send you to a local bar association that has either a free consultation or, $25. There's the American Immigration Lawyers Association, which is a great resource. I'm a member of that. I had a case just about 2 weeks ago. A woman had hired me to go with her to an ICE appointment, and it turns out she had been ordered deported about 15 years ago. And I said, but why didn't you go to your hearing? And she said, well, I thought if I went, I'd be deported. I said, that's what people don't understand. If you don't go, you're going to be ordered deported in your absence, and now you've ruined your opportunity to request an immigration benefit. So she said, well, I didn't know anybody, and she didn't ask. And she didn't ask until it was too late, 15 years later. So I said, don't ask friends and family things that you wouldn't ask, that they're not experts about. You need to talk to an immigration attorney. If it costs $25 or $100 to get that information, that's going to be worth it in the long run. That lady's now been detained for the last 2 weeks, waiting to be shipped out. It would have been much more worth it to have paid for a consultation or sought an attorney at the right time rather than waiting until it was too late. So please, please, please get that right information. A lot of churches have immigration information. In fact, I volunteer at the Catholic Church in Quincy, Florida, has a big Hispanic population, just to get the word out because there's so much misinformation. In fact, in Florida, where I am, it is a third-degree felony for a non-attorney to give advice.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, for exactly that reason. We were trying to protect people from predators, and unfortunately, in Spanish, the term notario means attorney. Well, notary in English is a notary public. That's someone who can witness a signature on a document. Doesn't mean you went to law school, and it sure doesn't mean you're an expert in immigration. But a lot of unscrupulous people use that term notary and translate it into notario to imply that they're a foreign attorney when they are not. So be very careful that if you're seeking immigration advice, it's not from a notario, because that is a third-degree felony for them, but they don't have a license to defend, so then you're in a position where you're spending money and you have no recourse and certainly aren't going to get an immigration benefit out of it.
Wow. So thank you so much for that in-depth information. So if an illegal immigrant is here in the United States, there are no ways where they can become legal to be able to obtain a green card? If ICE finds out that they are illegal, will they immediately be arrested and go to deportation? Because we worked on the kind of like on the backside with ICE. It was not like I was not a ICE officer, but we worked on the kind of like on the sidelines with ICE. Right. So are there any ways? By ICE,
if they've already been ordered deported, like that lady, the example I just gave you, if the person that's being picked up has already been ordered deported, there's no second chance with the judge. They have to leave. And ICE will work to facilitate the travel with the consulate. If the person has not been ordered deported, they can ask for an immigration benefit before a judge, so they have to ask for a hearing, or they can sign something called a stipulated waiver where they say, I don't want to see a judge, I just want to be shipped home. And that's very difficult to overcome. I had 2 people sign one of those last week because they didn't know any better, and now they've lost their opportunity to see a judge. So if the person has been here undocumented, and they've been here for 10 years, they don't have serious criminal history, and have legal immediate family, like citizen or permanent resident spouse or kids, and they're put in deportation, they can ask for a green card in court. So I'll repeat that because there's a lot of misinformation about it. People think if you're here for 10 years, that's it. It's 10 years, no serious criminal history, and legal immediate family who would suffer if the person is deported. That candidate can ask for a green card in immigration court. Otherwise, if you're undocumented, maybe you've only been here a couple of years, but there are ways for someone to legalize, even if they entered the U.S. without authorization. And what I see mostly in my office is the U visa. The U is a visa for victims of crime. So immigration allows someone who's been a victim of a crime to legalize. And the reason for that is we want to encourage people to report crime because everybody is safer. Immigrant, undocumented, U.S. citizen, we're all safer if crime is reported, right? So if we encourage the reporting of crime, then crime victims are going to benefit by being able to get the U visa. There's also the S visa, which is for people who are helpful to law enforcement when they've been a witness to a crime. Because, again, we want people like that to share what they've seen or what they know with law enforcement to make communities safer. So those are two exceptions to the rule of if you've entered undocumented, legalizing in the U.S. And then, of course, you have people who can ask for asylum. If you entered within the year, unless you have extraordinary circumstances, if you've entered within the year and you fear persecution or you suffered past persecution due to race, religion, nationality, membership in a particular social group or political opinion, then you can also ask for asylum in the U.S. even if you're undocumented. And I had a lady, we said recently, a few moments ago that the system is broken and how long the line is. I had a lady, she's been here for 18 years, and she's a lesbian from El Salvador, and she finally had her hearing over the summer and was able to legalize. But, that's too long. That's a denial of justice, waiting that long for a benefit.
Absolutely. And I'm pretty sure that there is a lot that perhaps maybe not aware of that they can ask for a green card in the courtroom. That is very, very interesting.
Yeah,
that's
very,
very
cancellation of removal. And so people often think they don't have the benefit available, so they'll sign that stipulated waiver and waste the opportunity to have asked for the green card. On the other hand, the same is true. If you don't have those three factors, 10 years, citizen or resident family who would suffer or serious criminal history, then there's no point in staying in detention to see a judge because you're not going to get a green card, and it may be better to just leave. That's why asking an immigration attorney with experience in these matters is crucial.
I absolutely agree. That is kind of startling of how the lady was not actually certified, as a paralegal, or I'm not even sure if a paralegal is allowed to be able to give information and charge for it. But that's kind of startling as to how but I guess they was just trying to get the information, so I guess they trusted this this individual. Wow,
and people are desperate. Sometimes people think, $30,000 and I can legalize, not realizing, hey, you could also have legalized for $3,000. And now you've lost your 30 and you don't have an immigration benefit to boot. So ask questions. Find out, is this person an attorney? Are they allowed to be giving this type of advice? And if the answer is no, there's something wrong with that picture.
Wow. So the next question, Elizabeth, that I would like to ask in regards to that. Now, I know that this is your practice, and so more than likely, probably about 90% individuals would have to come to you, to your office, to be able to obtain information and resources in regards to policies and procedures. So are there any type of community involvement that your law practice works with in trying to be able to stimulate what you are sharing with us today in the communities of where you are?
Of course. And, I have not met most of my clients. Most of my clients are either outside of Tallahassee, where my physical office is located, or maybe other places in the U.S. or even abroad. But opportunities like yours today, Diane, where I'm able to do a podcast like this, I speak at churches regularly, civic groups, Kiwanis Club, Rotary Club, things like that. I'm on the Speakers Bureau list for the Florida Bar. Or an organization can call me and say, Elizabeth, I've got 10 families. We'd like you to come to our church or hall and educate us about X topic. And I'd be happy to come if it's something local. If it's not local, we can do it by Skype or, FaceTime or something like that. But there's plenty of opportunities to get information. It doesn't have to be from me. It just should be a credible source. And many churches have teams, nonprofits that are certified to give immigration advice. So people just need to kind of scratch the surface and see what's out there and ask the right questions. But the attorney does not have to be local. Immigration is mostly a paper-based process, unless we're talking about the immigration court cases, but those can take years.
Okay. And so it was just something that I guess caught my attention while you were speaking on your response, and I would like to address this on the podcast. And it's in regards to churches and how can so let me explain it a little bit about a story that happened here in the South, excuse me, where I think this high-profile clergy was had a lot of, and he was not, he was African American, and so he allowed a lot of individuals to be able to be a part of his ministry, which were immigrants, but somehow the secretary or administrator of the church was printing up false documents as far as green cards were concerned. So just hit on that just a little bit of how important that we should not get involved, because there are all types of ways that we can be able to help immigrants. We can advocate for them, such as what you're doing now. You're helping women who rock with success to be able to push the information forward through this podcast, and there are other ways that we can be able to advocate for them. So if you would, or if you wanted to be able to touch on that a little bit as to how important that we should be able to come up with other avenues of trying to help them versus, because it was a lot of it was a big, huge profile case. The bishop actually ended up going to, well, I take that back. No, he did not. He did not get incarcerated through the U.S. Marshals. Actually, the administrator and the secretary took the fall for him, so they went to prison on his behalf. Yeah, and so I guess they knew what they were doing beforehand. But what it was a lot of individuals that were employed, and so the pastor felt that was his way of helping them by printing up a false document for them. So share with some churches while they, because all types of people listen to this podcast. So share with them as well as to the importance of how to go by doing that if they have individuals that become, if you wanted to now, this is just an option. You don't have to answer this, but share with them how important on a legal standpoint that we need to go in there and find other avenues of how to be able to make them a part of our ministry, or to, I don't know how to say it, of how to not get involved with trying to be the judge, jury, and the executioner, because that's what that sounds like that the bishop actually done.
Well, we're back to getting good information, and many churches provide good information. Unfortunately, not all do. So that's when you have the obligation. If you're in this country because you wanted a better life and you want to provide for your family, have an obligation to your family to ask, even if it is your pastor or your bishop, are you in a position to be giving advice? What is the basis for this? There's nothing wrong with asking that. You would ask your doctor, has this prescription been tested widely? Is this technique or this surgery common? How many have you done? It shouldn't be a problem to ask somebody in the church context those types of questions. But, I wouldn't go to my pastor to have a surgery. I'm not going to go to my pastor to have some kind of a legal process done. And if my pastor happens to be a doctor, he or she might do the surgery. But if they're not an attorney, or they're not a registered nonprofit that's recognized to give immigration advice, then it's just as bad as those unscrupulous notarios I mentioned. I've got a pastor right now who, he came over as a religious worker. That's the R1 visa. His church, for whatever reason, did not extend it timely. In the meantime, he has a child who was born with Down syndrome and a heart condition in the U.S. That child's a U.S. citizen, and here he is undocumented through no fault of his own. We are a country with compassion, and that's the kind of case that we should allow to be an exception, because it wasn't his fault, right? And so I filed something called a deferred action for him. It's a temporary reprieve. But until that baby turns 21, he's not going to be able to be petitioned for by a family member. So he's got a long haul ahead of him through no fault of his own.
Absolutely.
And that was in the church context.
Wow. So, I mean, you all heard it right here on Women Who Rock with Success. The legal standpoint of, you have to, as she stated, as you stated, we have to ask questions. We have to go through the proper procedures in order to deal with certain things or have certain inquiries. We don't want to take things into our own hands, put things into our own hands, which may cause us a little hardship later on down the road. Because as a citizen of the United States, or we are born in the United States, of course, we want to make sure that we follow the appropriate policies and procedures ourselves. So that apparently, to me, what that feels like to me, he was not helping those individuals. He was actually harming them more than he was giving, more access to them.
So here's an idea, Diane. All those immigrants who were harmed by that, they could do U visas now. They've been victims of crime. So maybe there is a benefit for them in the end.
Oh, wow. Gosh, yeah, because it was a huge, it was a massive case. It was high profiled, and it stayed in the news for a long time. And like I said, the secretary and the administrator, female and male, took the fall for the head leader. Yeah, they did. So they had to go into the federal system because of the information that was printed up illegally. So
and probably something else in that context. They were trying to help. Not everyone can be helped.
Right.
And that's a hard pill to swallow. I'll tell somebody probably once a day. They'll come in and they'll do my questionnaire, and I'll sit with them and ask questions, and then I'll say, I can't do anything for you. But you have to be able to acknowledge that not everyone can be helped. Some people don't have a benefit available, and then I have to say, you need to go home. You need to go home, because there's no point in telling people, pay money or wait in this line or do this, if there is no practical, feasible solution for them. And it's hard to be the bearer of that, and I'll often say, I don't want to hear from that you went to 5 more attorneys and paid consultation fees, and then they all told you the same thing, and in the meantime, you could have been living your life back at home. If there's nothing that can be done, sometimes there's nothing that can be done, and it doesn't mean that we need to break the law to try to come up with a solution. Some cases don't have solutions.
And I guess you took the words right out of my mouth. I think that's what the clergy was trying to do. In a perspective, he was trying to help them or prolong their stay here in the United States. It's just so happened, perhaps like you stated before, sometimes a person will get offended, or they may get mad, or probably, leave the church or leave their spouse or what have you, and then they pick up the phone and go to, dial it. I'm going to call this person on you and tell them that you're doing this and this and this over here. And so that's the reason why I kind of felt that's how it perhaps maybe it came out into the media as it did. Perhaps it was someone that was dissatisfied at the church, and they just got and probably was aware of what was going on, and they went in and they reported
it. Like I said, the ICE officer said disgruntled former employees and ex-lovers, they're the ones who called immigration the most.
Wow.
So maybe it was a disgruntled former church parishioner.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking as well. Well, we just about then came to the end of the broadcast, and we have had such a very exceptional time with you today, Elizabeth, and you can rest assured this will not be the last, because this is a very hot topic for individuals that are across the globe, as well as we know that podcast reaches all over the world, and so we're going to try to make sure that it is on every digital media resource that we can, because people are looking for answers, regardless if they are here illegal. They have a right to know. It doesn't matter. And so I thank you so much for coming onto the show, being willing to share your expertise with us. So before you go, we would love for you to be able to share any book releases, any upcoming events that you may have, any master classes that you are bringing to the public, as well as your social media handles if you desire to share in your website with the listeners.
Well, I will be presenting in December to the Florida Bar. I was asked to speak mostly to attorneys, but I'm trying to think if I have anything scheduled that might be of general knowledge. I did find out yesterday I'm the distinguished alumna of 2020 for my alma mater, Barry University, a small Catholic college in Miami. So that's exciting. I'll be going down for that in February. I'd be happy to connect on social media. My Twitter is Liz is Next. Liz is Next. I'm on Facebook, as is my office, which is Rambana and Ricci, and that's Rambana, Rambana and Ricci, Ricci. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Instagram as Ricci Bana. That's a combination of mine and my husband's last name, so it's Riccibana. And, Diane, I appreciate the opportunity. You're a woman who rocks for giving women these opportunities. So I appreciate you, and I hope we can connect again soon.
Yes, and we will be able to because, like I stated, it's a very hot topic. And listeners, she's also in our last release of our Women Who Rock with Success digital magazine, which is on Kindle right now. So we did make sure that we placed your office as well as you inside of the magazine. So the individuals can be able to contact and connect with you that way because, like I said, this is something very hard felt for me, and I feel that immigrants can be able, for the ones that are legal, they can be able to take it back to those that are illegal, back to their community. So I think that is very, very important. So thank you again for being a guest on our show. Listeners, for all upcoming events and who's going to be next on the podcast, you can go to our website at www.womenwhorockwithsuccess.com. And so until next Tuesday, or I take that back, this coming Saturday, which Girls Who Rock with Success will be on live at 9 o'clock. We will see you then at that time. So have a great day, everyone, and thank you again, Elizabeth, for being our guest.
Thanks, Diane. Have a great one. Bye.
Bye-bye. Women Who Rock with Success is an affiliate of Girls Who Rock with Success and the National Extraordinary Professional Women, which airs every Tuesday at 9 o'clock a.m. Central Standard Time. This is your show host, Miss Diane Winbush. Until next time, you be blessed.